Isn't it beautiful? That, of course, is the opening of one of Beethoven's most famous piano pieces, the Moonlight Sonata. But what if he had written the Moonlight Sonata without using arpeggios? Well, it would sound something like this. It's kind of dull, isn't it? Well, what about one of his other famous piano pieces? You probably recognize this one. Yes, of course, that's for Elise. But what if Beethoven had written this without using arpeggios? It would sound something like this. Well, the arpeggios make all the difference, don't they? They create a certain sound, a certain feeling, a certain atmosphere. It's kind of hard to describe, but that's what these arpeggios do. And Beethoven and countless other composers used arpeggios. What they did was they take a simple chord, like Beethoven did here. For example, he took this very basic C-sharp minor chord and he broke it up, playing one note after another, playing the notes of the chord separately. And so we have the arpeggio. Now that, of course, is a noun. You have an arpeggio. You can also have the verb form of this word, to arpeggiate, to take a chord and arpeggiate it. Both of these words come from the Italian word arpa, A-R-P-A. That's the Italian word for harp. And so you know that on a harp you can play arpeggios, one note after another, by strumming the strings. Why did Beethoven, and of course countless other composers, use these arpeggios instead of plain chords? Beethoven isn't here to answer that question, so I'm going to hazard a guess myself. So going back to the nature of arpeggios, what do they do when you use them in music? Well, first of all, they create motion. Obviously this, that's moving, that has movement to it, as opposed to just playing a block chord. And they lighten the texture of the music. This sounds lighter and airy, whereas this sounds rooted into the ground. And they give the music a rhythmic lift. They move it forward. This is going somewhere, you know? And arpeggios, of course, you can hear them all over music that you're listening to. But what about those plain chords? Well, we use those plain block chords when we want something to sound solid, rooted in the ground, when we want a thicker texture. We want the music to have weight and strength. So consider the opening of this famous Chopin piano piece. This is known as his Military Polonaise. So right, that has a very strong military sound because of these block chords. But what if Chopin had tried to write this using arpeggios? Well, it certainly doesn't sound very militaristic anymore, does it? It has a much different texture. And so you can see that a composer, depending on what type of mood, what kind of atmosphere he or she wants to create, they will either use arpeggios or they might use the mighty block chord. Now, other things play into this as well. They can use scales and different kinds of figures, but right now we're concentrating on arpeggios and block chords. I'd like to play for you an Irish folk song called Molly Malone. It's also known by the name Cockles and Mussels. You'll probably recognize it. It's a very famous Irish folk tune. Now, in this arrangement, we use block chords in the left-hand accompaniment, and then we're going to use arpeggios. And I want you to notice the difference in texture and weight and just the different atmosphere that is created by the use of these two different accompaniment styles, block chords and then arpeggios. So notice we start out using block chords in the left hand, which gives it a little bit more of a weightier feel. Just continuing to use block chords. And then we switch to arpeggios in the left hand. And now it sounds a little lighter, more airy. Notice the melody itself is an arpeggio. So when you're listening to any piece of music, it can be practically any type of music, listen now for the use of arpeggios. For example, if you're listening to a famous Mozart sonata, this is a type of arpeggio. Basically, if Mozart decided not to use arpeggios, it would sound like this. And now, all the movement has gone out of it. It sounds it just doesn't sound right, does it? So, we want those broken chords. And it gives it that light and airy atmosphere. Listen now for arpeggios whenever you're listening to classical music or any kind of music, and you'll see the difference that they can make and why composers have used them so frequently. Thanks for watching. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel if you have not yet already. That helps the channel very much. If you'd like to support my work, you can go to my Patreon page. I will leave the link below. I look forward to speaking to you in the next one.